view is that if we're going to win a final, let's do it against a team that beat us the year before. Let's do it against the very best. We welcome that opportunity.
That last passage of play was probably a true testament to the trust and camaraderie within that team.
That moment is my greatest one. It's a feeling I'll never forget.
I don't think there's ever been a moment like it in rugby probably since.
The 10 seconds after the final whistle were amongst the most pure, natural joy that the club's experienced.
Did I think it was a group that was going to fight back and win? Yeah, I absolutely did.
Jackson for Saracens. Head down, over the ball, punts it towards the post, and it was never going to miss! Saracens are in front. 4 minutes left of the Guinness Premiership final. There's Hipkiss. Hipkiss goes on. Leicester have the try right at the death. Drama here at Twickenham. Leicester, the champions, are still exactly that. What an amazing finish.
Yeah, that season 09-010 was a huge battle for us, but when I look back on it, I think it was validation of what we were trying to create in terms of making a final. So the purpose behind the group, how we were trying to build a cohesive unit. So to make that final was an achievement in itself, but nonetheless, we were hugely disappointed. We lost in the dying minutes of the game. So going into pre-season, my view was that, you know, it's more of the same. I felt very strongly that we could just continue on with building the kind of culture that we were trying to build. So I think everyone overall was feeling positive and had a bit of a bit between their teeth in terms of moving forward and proving a point that it wasn't 1 year. This was something that we could continue and move forward into the second season.
We didn't look back at 2010 as a failure. We rather looked at it as a huge success in our progress and our process to become champions eventually, whenever that may have been. A lot of the press, a lot of the public were out there sort of writing us off, you know, prior to that 2010 final that we played in. So for us, it was a case of, you know, we were quite keen to galvanise ourselves and prove everybody wrong. What I can remember is that the vibe and the energy in the squad at the beginning of that season was extremely high.
When we entered that pre-season, fresh from having lost the final the year before, that wasn't really foremost in our minds, because what we had set out to do was to establish some really firm foundations for the club to be a much more consistent club than we had been for the 10 years before that. What we wanted to do in 2010-11 was very much carry on from some of the good work that had been done the year before and bring that consistency of performance, that no pick and choose mentality to win more games away from home. And you know, that was at the front of that pre-season, but it was also a pre-season where we wanted to get into good work habits like we'd established the year before, and I think we were able to do that.
I think coming into that pre-season in 2010-2011 season was quite tough for me. The year before had been a sort of fairy tale in terms of getting to the final with no expectations, winning away at Northampton against the odds, getting to the final and being so close. And I think at that age, I didn't think that we would go on this, you know, wonderful run over the next 10, 11 years. You just think, oh, maybe that's my only finals appearance, and it was snatched away. At first, you know, naturally a bit of a worry. I wasn't sure how the year would go. I think what was most impressive was Brendan stuck to what he believed in, and pre-season didn't change. It was about making memories, having fun. It wasn't about the results. It wasn't about getting to finals. It was about treat the players well, and in return we worked really hard. I think there was just a little bit of, yes, we'd done so well to get to the final. Can we do that again? You hope we can, but perhaps a bit of trepidation in terms of, you know, you're just unsure.
I'd always noticed Brendan Venter around the circuit, and then when he came in, he did the opposite of what I thought he was going to do. I thought he'd come in and say, right, we're really going to smash people and hit them and knock them back. And he said the opposite. He said, we're going to become a family. We're going to look after each other. We're going to care for each other. And hopefully we'll win, but we're going to create real memories that we'll look back in years to come and we'll enjoy those memories of being together. And I think Edward Griffiths also played a big role in that. But Brendan certainly instigated the change.
There was a complete sort of culture revolution at Saracens. It was this mantra of the club are going to treat you really well, but in turn, players are going to try really hard. And I think that team in particular lived and breathed that ethos, that when we were on the pitch, we were as competitive as we could be, but outside of rugby, really enjoyed life. Guys were immersed themselves in cultural things in London, guys were studying, guys were actively involved in life after rugby, whether it be a job opportunity or setting up a new business, and people lived and breathed that ethos. Nothing was ever held against players, and I think in turn it created the sense of accountability that when guys came to the training ground, they were so eager to give back and so eager to be part of something bigger that it was the sum of the parts that made the team completely strong and tight together.
I remember a few of the meetings that I came into in my first couple of days have kind of stuck with me. So one of the things the coaches said in the first ever meeting I came in was they spoke about a skill error and an effort error. And they said if you make a skill error, it's on us because it's our job as coaches is to improve your skills. But if you make an effort error, it's entirely on you. So I just loved that because it freed you up. So I remember I went up to the coaches afterwards and said, so if I work hard, I can't screw up. And they said, yeah, exactly. And that was it. And that was the foundation of everything that we did.
To begin with, we wanted to get real fundamentals in place in 2009-10, which were around our set piece, around our kicking game, around our defence, around our ability to put teams under pressure. And every year we've tried to add something to that initial plan, and 2010-11 was probably the start of that.
I think the style of play, particularly in the beginning, was one of strangulation really. It was about I suppose outmaneuvering and waiting out opposition, being more patient and being effective at those so-called boring aspects of the game. I think I probably kicked the ball more in one season than I kicked in my whole career to date up at that stage. And then probably, as mentioned, we moved on from that, and I think we shocked a lot of the Premiership teams in terms of the way we became a bit more expansive, started to move the ball, with confidence, and with the way referees were blowing and with the stats that were being churned out by Brendan, it made more sense for us to keep the ball in hand, as previously when it was probably more worthwhile to get rid of the ball and rather defend. So it was stark contrast from one year to the next, from that 2010 to 2011 season. But it suited a lot of our players, and I suppose it became, in many ways, a bit more enjoyable to be a part of. But it was always enjoyable, beating teams, no matter whether you did it in a boring way or an exciting way.
We were aware that there had to be a little bit more complexity to our game and to keep teams guessing. But I think overall, when I reflect on that season and even going into pre-season and talking about the plan, it was still about coming together as a strong unit and defending and kicking as if our lives depended on it.
I think at that point in time, being part of the Saracens culture and being part of this real evolution in professional sport, you very much saw it as a trailblazing force. And not only did it, make our guys so much more excited day to day to come to the training ground, having something unique to look forward to and having these special moments, but I think in turn it also subconsciously played on the part of our rivals and our other teams.
Yeah. How important are trips away? Obviously, very difficult to say. I think Alex Sanderson summed it up best for me once when he said, it's not the number of pints of beer you drink; it's the number of conversations you have, and just talking to people in an environment that is different to the training paddock, if you like. And I think it's very important. But it all comes down to this thing of about, you know, you can't just say you care about people. You've actually got to get off your backside and demonstrate it.
They were an unbelievably hard-working bunch, and a bunch who knew how to enjoy themselves. Yeah, we went to Biarritz in that summer, which was a phenomenal pre-season tour. There was still very much that vibe in the club that we wanted to get to know each other as well as we could, and the best way to do that was sometimes away from the rugby, and we knew that would make a difference on the rugby field. I think the Oktoberfest trip was one of the first in-season trips that we went on, with a game to follow that weekend, and you know, they've become kind of legendary since then. But what we found with the playing group is that they've always fronted up after those trips. Those trips have probably had a bit more attention than they actually need, to be honest.
I'll lie if I say I've got great memories of the Oktoberfest, because I do have great memories, and obviously I didn't enjoy it that much. I'll never forget, we spoke to Edward, and I was in the management group back then, and he said, no, I think we played Northampton maybe the Saturday and then Leicester the following week, and Edward said, no, you know, we're going to go to the Oktoberfest. I said, sure. That's a bit crazy. It's in between two of our biggest games of the season, and I don't think it's a great idea. He said, no, don't worry, you'll be fine. It'll be great for the team.
I remember going into one of the beer tents and seeing this person getting carried out at 1:30 in the afternoon and thinking, it's going to be an interesting day, this. I've never heard of it done at another club, but the coaches basically said, listen, we don't care, okay, just show up, and we don't care if you're still a little bit drunk or if you're hungover or whatever, okay, just show up and buy in and don't moan, and everyone did that.
Pretty simply, as a player, you're told you're going to go to Oktoberfest and you're going to have a great laugh, and then you turn up and you come back and you just do the same training as before. You're over the moon about it. You don't complain, you just get on the flight and you go.
This one was the first time we were like, hold on a second, this is a little bit unusual. Going to Oktoberfest, sinking quite a few beers.
And there was some nervousness, you know. We'd never really had such a big blowout like that before in the lead up to a game.
We all just bought into the process. As I said, we trained on the Tuesday, which was a challenge, but it was a part of it, and we knew that we had to front up against Leicester at the weekend, and we did that. So we made an unbelievable memory together on the Monday at the Oktoberfest, and then another one over the weekend.
Two things for me that stand out when I think back of that trip is, like, firstly, you realise the method behind the madness, and you're building these bonds with players. You're going on these really unique and interesting trips. So as building these bonds actually meant something. And the second thing was then you were pretty fired up for that next game, because we said internally as a squad, we need to back up. We can't go on these trips and not back up. If the coaches and the senior management and the ownership want to continue to do this, let's make sure we put in a really good performance. And so it almost motivated us even more.
We saw it as a force for galvanizing the team, and when game day came, we had this unique ability to switch on and switch off. And that's ultimately what it's about in professional sport.
The fact that we'd gone off to Oktoberfest in the week, had a great laugh, you know, best time, and then come back and still won, didn't endear us to the rest of the Premiership. But as players, we loved it, and that tradition carried on. From, I guess, late October, so November, December, Jan, was quite a key period for us in the season. We struggled a bit in the Champions Cup, but we still managed to keep rallying in the Premiership. We didn't have the experience we had before on those senior players, but just our fight and togetherness with a style of play that was becoming a bit more conservative and structured was just showing us that with just effort and teamwork we could go a long way still.
There's one game that does stick in my mind. We played Bath, and I don't know whether it was in the first 6 games or shortly after that, but we had a lot of injuries. We went down to Bath. Owen Farrell as a 19-year-old, Jackson Ray as a 19-year-old, George Crew as a 19-year-old, Sam Stanley as a 19-year-old, James Short as a 19-year-old, all played that day. But it was one of the best victories I've been involved in, because we went with this really young, inexperienced team. Most of them had never played in the Premiership before. And I remember Steve Porthwick's captaincy that day, which was incredible. The way he led the team, the way he got the best out of these young fellas. So it was a fabulous victory, and it was the start of some of their journeys. And obviously they're so important to the club now.
It then obviously transpired that Brendan Venter was going to leave the club as head coach. Now, he spoke to us all, and Brendan sort of said that he wasn't leaving for good. He was going back home. He was always a plan for him just to do sort of 1 or 2 years. And I think there was a bit of worry at first, because Brendan was so important in the change of the culture of the club, the whole transformation of the club.
He's an absolute force of nature that when he talks you can't help but listen. He's motivational, he's mad. For him to leave the squad at quite a crucial time of the season was tough, but the rest of the coaching team had been building around him. You know, Mark steps in and starts, steering the ship in a perhaps a slightly more composed manner, but ultimately Brendan he was the heartbeat, and so he had instilled enough in us for that to move forward.
When Brendan said to me that was going to happen, it was a bit nerve-wracking, really, to be honest, because he had been such a huge part of the change that had occurred, and such a big personality and such a driving force. But one of the things that he had discussed with me right at the beginning when we started the project was that we wanted the club not to be dependent on any one person. We didn't think it was going to be a very successful club if somebody left and then it all fell apart. And I think down the years we've seen that. We've had a number of coaches who've gone on to coach England, and Andy Farrell had left to go to a bigger job, Paul Gustard, Alex Sanderson now, and what we found is that people step up. So Brendan leaving was a big deal to begin with, but it showed some of the foundations that he had put in place over the 18 months before he left, that we were able to actually crack on business as normal, and we had a very young, enthusiastic but really motivated coaching group underneath me, with Andy and Paul Gustard and Alex Anderson all starting their coaching careers around that point. So what should have been a big problem turned out to be okay.
We now know that this coaching team that we had pulled together was insanely talented, so we had characters left, right and centre to lead us through. Bear in mind we still had about 1.5 years or just over of Brendan and the rest of the management instilling what it meant to be a Saracen in this new environment that we had created. And really what he talked about was more personality traits and basics like work rate and coming together as a unit. So the real measure of Brendan's success is that he was able to step back knowing that he'd put that in place.
As it turned out, you have to say, huge credit to the coaches who stayed, but also to Brendan. He'd obviously ingrained in them and us as players exactly what it meant to work hard, that extra 5%, that honesty. It was so important that they take that forward, and the coaches did take that forward, and the players took that forward.
Things changed, but not completely, and that's probably the beauty of the culture and the evolution of the team, that we've started to layer things on year. One of the great success stories of Brendan's era was the way he empowered the people below him.
At the time, I just kind of got on with it and didn't think too much about it, but I was determined just to be myself and not try to be like Brendan or try and copy his personality, because the players would have seen through that, and it seemed to go okay.
Well, they're about to walk out into Leicester's Park developed Welford Road, and not many leave here with positive memories.
Yeah, I mean, winning at Welford Road is just a huge milestone in that season. going away at such an iconic stadium, club, the history that they've got, you know, they turned that into a real hard place, one of the hardest in the league. So that was a moment we said to ourselves, right, we really are kicking on now. And that gave us a huge amount of confidence, obviously, considering it was Leicester, the team that beat us the season before. So that was a big moment, for sure.
Here they come. 4-point looking in determined mood.
If we had doubt, then we probably put it to bed that day, and we saw that anything is possible, and that we can actually take this to the next level and actually be competitive and play well and win trophies. So for us rocking up there as a leadership group, it was vital. We had a mindset that we're not going to have a pick and choose mentality. If we play away, we play at home, we're going to give it our all and we're going to have effort. And self-belief was just the last bit of the puzzle we probably needed.
And he sends that straight through the middle of the post. All the hard work done by the pack.
Not just, you know, that to beat Leicester at Welford Road, but what that meant for us as a group, because right at the beginning we said that we wanted to be more consistent. We didn't want to be this yo-yo team, which we had been, who were capable of good performances and then a rubbish performance the week after. And I think in the years before 2009-10, we hadn't won an away game. Good sign that we were on the right track, that we were becoming that team who you could rely on and depend on, and who were going to front up for every game. And you know, winning at Welford Road was great, but it was just a part of that process to be a much more consistent side.
For the lead, Alex Good gets the lead.
I think it was a bit of a statement, but for us, it was just the next game, and that was the most important. And I also think at that point in the season, I think we'd proven as a squad that we were a really, really tight squad. We were really united. We'd shared a lot of memories at that point already, and I think we were in a good place to kick on into the business end of the season.
Well, the coin toss with Neil de Kock and Richard Wigglesworth has become kind of this big story.
The way I would sum it up is that the whole year there were crazy things going on at Saracens. Unique things, should I say, that we were not used to as players at previous clubs or in our professional careers. By the time it got to the final, it's sort of water off a duck's back, to be honest, knowing that they both have their hand in the final and do what they do.
Yeah, the coin toss was a bit of a tricky one. I suppose at the time I had a certain thought about it, and in hindsight maybe I think a little bit differently, but essentially what happened was we were told that they couldn't decide who was to play. Should we get to the final, who was going to play in the playoffs, in the semi-final and the final, because we were both evenly matched, myself and Richard Wigglesworth, so they decided to toss the coin.
It's also a reflection of when Brendan and the coaching staff said they were going to do something. It wasn't for a cliche or just for show. They actually then backed it up and did it. And I think that for Wiggy and for Neil, I think it probably, again, was kind of validation of this idea that we're actually going to run a proper rotation system, and we both value you guys and what you can bring to the final, and this is how we're going to back it up.
We had a bit of a rotation policy throughout the squad, which was in some cases not as equal as it was in their case, and they genuinely shared exactly the same minutes for the whole season. So they would, one would play 50 minutes and one would play 30 minutes, and then the next week the other one would play 50 minutes, the other one would play 30 minutes, and that happened all the way through the season. And when we got to the semi-finals and final, it just didn't seem right to all of a sudden make a selection on one of the two of them. And to try to pick who was better and who was, and so we suggested to them that maybe we tossed a coin. I can't remember if they were both happy about it or not, to be honest, but that's what we did.
It was actually in our lunchroom, and we did it, I think, straight after lunch. We tossed the coin, and I think I won it, which meant that I would play the final and Richard would play the semi-final, and that's how it was settled.
As players, we didn't really know much about it until we saw who was playing. I think Brendan, though, it shows how much confidence he had in two players. I mean, it's easy to have confidence in those two players. both internationals, both world-class players. He'd given so much confidence to players. Players feel trusted, they feel empowered because they're like, yeah, I'm going to play 30 minutes. I'm not given 3 minutes at the end of the game. You know, I'm empowered, I'm trusted, and they played so much better. And Brendan was the master of that. I've never been part of a team environment where it was such a happy environment for even the players who weren't playing or the players who were on the bench.
A lot of people have spoken about the strength in depth at this club. It seems that the rotation policy this season is really starting to pay off at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, were a bit sceptical looking at that and the way things were done at the beginning of the season and the beginning of last season. But it's proven its worth. Guys are getting a lot of game time, and the more time the guys get on the pitch, the better they are. So we're lucky in that regard. Where if we do have a bit of a shortfall in one position, we've got other guys who are ready to step in.
Sometimes when selections are really close like that, like it's very hard to explain to players, and we were fortunate enough in that case that the two of them agreed to that process.
In hindsight, if I think about it now, it was probably the coach at the time, Mark, didn't want to make a difficult decision and take an unpopular route. Be that as it may, it turned out all right.
It's just proof of how good the squad was. Probably do it with each position. You can flip a coin. It just shows as well that the players we had, it was all about the team. It wasn't about the me and the I. It was, us.
It was unusual, and there you go.
And here they are, one win away from playing Leicester again in the final.
I think that semi-final is quite interesting.
I have this gut feeling that reminds me that we were quite lucky.
It was a bit of a stodgy game. We beat them well a few weeks before, but sometimes the challenge of doing that is they were super motivated and they didn't really have anything to lose because no one expected them to win. And fair play, they came and they played well, but we managed to find a way to sneak through that game.
Again, playoff rugby is about progressing and getting into the final. And I thought that we played well enough throughout the season. I thought we were consistent enough, and I thought we deserved a shot at another final. And squeezing past Gloucester at home was almost a relief that we had another shot at a final. So yeah, I remember feeling a little bit lucky, but nobody really remembers how you got there. But the fact that you're there was probably the most important thing.
With help from the Mystic East, kick that may yet take Saracens back to south-west London.
The year before, we'd gone to Northampton and we were on a high in terms of how we were playing, but we were firm underdogs. I think we'd come fourth and they'd come first, and we had one of the all-time great games at Franklin's Garden. It was like this shock that we did win, and we were so happy and the celebrations were unbelievable. There was an element of we've done really well to get here. I think this year as the season built, and I talked about at the start how I wasn't sure, we'd built and we got, you know what? We are title contenders. We'd beaten Leicester home and away. I think the nerves of being the favourites and not having been in that position was tough.
My recollection of that game was that although it was a twitchy, nervy game, that it shouldn't have been, and we were much better than that scoreline suggested, and we just made life difficult for ourselves and never quite got away on the scoreboard, and that just always made the game just a little bit too tense for everybody. But it was just honestly just good to get that one out of the way and get back into the final, having been in the final 12 months before.
Extraordinary finish to this match. It's been coughed up by the Cherry and Whites, and all Saracens have to do is fire it into the round stand, and they'll be heading to the west stand. They've got the penalty.
There was a different feeling about getting into the final though, because having get into the final in 2009-10, we were all like kids in a candy shop and so excited to be there and that kind of thing. Whereas this time it felt a little bit different. We wanted to make sure we turned up on the day.
The paperwork still has to be completed, but now it's signed and sealed.
There, we beat Gloucester, and it was almost, the guys walked off the field and you could just see it's business, but it's not done yet. This is not the victory. We've ticked this box, but in 2 weeks' time, that's really going to make the difference. So we knew exactly what was expected of us and what we expected of ourselves.
We wanted to be the sort of team that would sort of consistently challenge, and so we found a way through, and then we're into the final against the team that had beaten us the previous year, which was incredibly exciting.
We hadn't been in that position, and that relief to get through to the final and see Leicester there and go, okay, well, last year you got one over us. This year we're ready, we're prepared, we're a different side. and we're coming.
We win, it's scrappy, but that's all we need to do. We're on to the final, and I think there's just a slightly more like steely mentality. It's like, you know, this is in our grasp. We don't have to get over ourselves. Let's just turn up to Twickenham and do our jobs. I think like it just all comes back to the environment we had created. For me, I was now emotionally tied into the club in more ways than one. Unfortunately, my mother was diagnosed with cancer in September, so quite early in the start of the season. And the way the club rallied around me, all the way from Nigel, Ed Griffiths, to the coaching staff, to the players, was unbelievable. And unfortunately, she passed away in March, culminating in almost the entire squad and organisation turning up to her funeral. So I had got to the point, you know, when that final was upon us, that I was emotionally tied into the club. I wanted to give back, considering what they had done for me.
What happened to Chris Wilder's mum was devastating. It's such tragic news for Chris, his family, and everyone at the club. To lose your mother, I can't imagine how devastating that is. And Chris wanted to go out there and play and perform, and all you can do as friends is try and get behind him, and everyone did.
When you set out to create something like Brendan wanted to create, which was a group of people who were going to support each other through thick and thin, we're going to care about each other through thick and thin. They're all easy things to say and they're all easy things to talk about, but the proof's always in the pudding, and none of that was forced. You know, people wanted to attend in their numbers, people cared about Chris Wiles like you couldn't believe, like they cared about their other teammates. And when the tough moments came in that season and beyond, and the seasons that have come since then that spirit in the club has shone through, and it's not a forced thing. It's a genuine thing, and it's something we can be really proud of, I think.
As a whole, we were just fired up and as tight as you could be, particularly because we didn't have any superstars, we didn't have a huge amount of internationals. We were still fighting this battle that, you know, people wanted to knock us down. People didn't either like the style that we were playing, people didn't like the fact we were going away on trips. People didn't really understand what we were building, but we did, and it was time to prove everyone what we could do.
There were very much two schools of thought and two probably overwhelming feelings going into that final. I think still as a club who had only really been to one final before in the Premiership, there was a sense of excitement. So not only from players, but support staff, the greater organisations, family of players, there was this real buzz and sense of excitement. But then on the flip side, I think going in, there were certainly nerves. Guys had this feeling that the whole season is summed up really in one day. And it's very much a very sad ideology of sport, that there can only be one winner, despite everything that's gone on before.
We've tried to keep those weeks as normal as they can be, to keep the excitement at bay, but you know, everyone was looking forward to it. Everybody was excited to go again, and I don't think there was a great fear about losing, which is always the thing you want to guard against, and you wanted to get them more excited about giving our best performance, and if that was good enough on the day, that was good enough on the day.
Our view is that if we're going to win a final, let's do it against a team that beat us the year before. Let's do it against the very best. So that was our mentality. We welcomed that opportunity. Put any team in front of us was our kind of mentality, and we'll come together and we'll fight for each other.
There was an edge to us that we wanted to win. We didn't want it to be like the year before. We'd come a long way, and perhaps that extra motivation of what had happened losing in the last couple of minutes the year before was in the back of our minds.
What marked the difference from the 2010-2011 squad to the 3 years prior to that I was involved in was the self-belief. It was this utmost belief that whoever we put onto the pitch was going to make it incredibly difficult for any team, whether it was Leicester or Gloucester or Northampton, whoever it was, to beat us.
I think the learnings from the Saracens team the year before was that our set piece had to be the best in the league. And I think in many ways in that season we had started to prove that, both from a line-out efficiency perspective, but also in the scrum. And we knew that if we'd be able to have parity or get on the upside, the collective spirit of the team and our work rate off the ball would be a point in difference for our team.
Interestingly, or funnily enough, that week Brendan was there for the semi-final and the final, and he'd seen, and well, everyone had seen because it'd been played about 20 million times, because Manu Talangi had come on the scene that year, Discovery Player of the Year, and was in the England squad, that Manu had made a break up at Leicester and had a 40-yard run up at me and bounced me and just scored in the corner.
Manu looks for a handoff, he looks for another. Manu Talangi steps back inside. Oh my goodness, he's gone and scored.
You know, looking back now, there's probably no shame with Manu Talangi. He's done it to many people, but it was played enough times that it wasn't great watching. The equivalent we had was Kameli Ratavu basically taking a run up from 15 yards and trying to bounce me in the lead up to the game all week. And I think the first time he smashed me out of the way, and I was like, cool, this is confidence booster. And Brendan was like, getting a bit cagey, this isn't great for me. And then we found a sort of technique that I was going to use, and I honestly didn't have, wasn't confident enough to tell Brendan that I couldn't feel my shoulder leading up to the game. But it showed you that Brendan, every single thing he would check on every player, whether it was kickoffs, because the year before we'd lost a kickoff late on, so short kickoffs everyone was ready for. And that level of detail was all there. I think going into it, there was obviously nerves, but because we'd beaten Leicester twice that year, and I think there was a sense of, you know, what had happened the year before, we were really, really ready.
When you look at in a final, you kind of reflect and you sit around the team room and you look down the line, you see who's in your team. And I think that was one of those days where you looked at each player in that team and you realized, sure, we actually got a decent bunch of players here. Great people, first of all, but fantastic rugby players. Once you got that feeling, that brings a lot of comfort.
I'd never played in a final before. It was amazing to be there. There was thousands of Saris fans, you know, were lining a route through, and sort of walk through that was incredible. And then we were in a really, really good place. As you said, we started the game well. We were confident. The coaches were unbelievable at just making it simple.
And the two who lasted the distance best of all, and the showdown that's been looming since January. It's the Aviva Premiership final. It's Leicester and Saracens.
I think that first half of the final was one of the best halves we've ever played, really. We had been quite conservative and structured getting to the final. And that first 40 minutes, we played with a tempo and ambition that we hadn't seen all year, or since the start of the year, typified by Neil de Kock. He was phenomenal in that first 40 minutes, and they couldn't live with it.
Definite theme that the Saracens backs are trying to target the big front row balls of Leicester.
Barrett to the Kock, he's charging through. That was all about the clever footwork of Brad Barrett. Saracens have the penalty.
I think a close-fought final will always be kind of judged by a moment of magic. In that game, that piece of magic that stood out when Scala obviously caught the ball, you need that as a team sometimes, you just give you that little bit of more energy.
I'm not sure how far into the game it was, but I was absolutely exhausted. And I remember they passed it back, I went through to charge it down. I obviously didn't get it, and they kicked it out into touch. And I remember turning around, and we took a quick throw in, and I was screaming, no, no! I was dying, absolutely dying, but it was one of those, when you go from no, yes! It was one of those moments, because obviously Sculla got it, showed incredible pace across the pitch, you know, managed to get to the edge of the defence, and then he fed it to Shorty, and we scored it in the corner. A brilliant try and a brilliant moment.
Here goes Brits, Short's outside, Brits is going the long way around. This is Short for the line, first try in the final, belongs to Saracens.
Coming in at half-time, I think being 7 points up gave the sense of belief, I think, within the team, but very much this feeling that the job's not done. And that's so poignant, I think, in a big game, in that playing for 40 minutes is irrelevant if you can't match it up in the second half. So I just remember a sense of calm, or a sense of urgency, people not getting carried away, some really strong words spoken by senior players, and the team going back onto the pitch knowing that there was still another 40 minutes to make sure that we achieved our goal.
When you talk about heart, you talk about passion, you talk about fighting for each other, you talk about backing up after trips away, you're able to show that in defence. And we were fired up and ready for those challenges. You know, we just said internally, and we said to each other, this is the way you're going to earn respect, and this is the way that you're going to, you know, win championships is defence.
The final 40 minutes of the Aviva Premiership season. Perhaps the final 40.
Defence, it tells you what kind of family feeling you have, and you're willing to fight for the person next to you. Now, our whole foundation of the team was built by the coaches, especially Paul Gustard, on defence. Our discipline was fantastic. We knew we had a fantastic defence. So we got to a point where I think there was this kind of underlying belief that if we had to lead a game by 5, 6, 7, 8 points, that we probably had enough confidence to know we can see it through.
Effort was epitomised by defence and by your kick chase and by your effort to get off the ground. You know, that was ingrained in us, you know, over the 18 months, 24 months that we've been together. And we were always a team that were going to make mistakes, but it wasn't going to be because of lack of effort. You know, when you've got a guy like Brad Barrett, you know, leading a squad like that defensively, you know, it spoke volumes in terms of the way we approached that final.
I remember, you know, one of their big threats at the time was Alassana Tuilagi, and I just sort of said to Chris, don't worry, I won't leave you alone with him. We'll both tackle a leg each and try to bring him down. But it probably resonated, you know, amongst the team that there was guys willing to make up for the faults that maybe one of their teammates made. And that was probably one of the hallmarks of why that team was so special, because no mistake was isolated. There was always someone willing to go the extra mile to make sure that someone else's mistake was covered.
Now here's what was agreed at the end of last week. Heads you start, tails you come off the bench.
What I do remember is, and maybe this is fate in many ways, is that at 48 minutes or 49 minutes, a minute before I was to come off, I broke my arm for the second time by trying to tackle Tuilagi, the Alisana Tuilagi on the wing, who broke its side and broke my forearm. So it's a good thing we had that 50-30 minute split, because I don't think I would have lasted too much longer after 49 minutes anyway.
I remember being exhausted in that second half and looking around the group, and everyone was literally giving everything that they had. So that in itself, it gave me a confidence, a belief. I also remember that Faz, in his first final, I think he kicked 6 out of 6, which for me, it was just incredible. It just showed the mental strength that under all that pressure, he was still sort of banging the kicks over.
From the acutest of angle, the voices are London voices. Oh, and the look on Owen Farrell's face.
Having been in this position before, I think we're vividly aware that going with a full score ahead into the latter minutes of the game really counts for nothing. It's probably at the time where you're most susceptible, and you'd probably be even more focused and attentive to the small roles that allow your team to execute. Off the back of Owen's last penalty, I guess there would have been lots of discussion to make sure that we nail the kickoff and be able to execute and get out our half. I don't think we did that in the end.
And now Saracens are offside from a kickoff.
And what sort of resulted was Leicester having full possession for, 4 to 5 minutes for the last few minutes.
I'm pretty sure it's 10 minutes. I'm going with 10 minutes of extra time.
I'm going to go for, I think it was just over 9 minutes. And I reckon in total there was about 39 phases. So about 34 and then a penalty. And then maybe an extra 4 or 5, something like that.
60 seconds to go. What a climax to the season. Gathered in by Croft.
I think about that as sort of a controlled desperation. Is we were as a group, like, we had such a good year, we were so tight. What had happened the previous year was at the back of all of our minds, even though a number of us weren't here, and we just weren't going to let them score. It was as simple as that. We were willing to give absolutely everything to stop them scoring.
Time's nearly up, surely not again. There can't be a Saracen supporter at home or in the pub who can watch this.
Had you been under that pressure at any point during the game, they probably would go on to score. But it was probably a true test of the mettle and grit and determination that we managed to keep them out.
Yeah, I think the defensive performance that day reflected how it had been the whole season. To be honest, it was the one area of our game which went to an absolutely different level.
This is extraordinary. Almost as extraordinary as the finish last season, and we never dreamt that that would be repeated.
That defensive effort reflected a lot of things about the club. It reflected the relationships that have been built between those players, this kind of fight for one another, the spirit that existed among the group, and nowhere more important than the end game.
It's almost as if there's a force field 5 metres out from the Saracens' try line.
Obviously it comes down to that last period, and that's something I'll never forget. I have watched it again a few times, but I can recall every bit of it in my mind anyways. I'll never forget the noise. It just deafening. You know, I couldn't shout to Stretz, who was 5 yards away, and he couldn't hear me and I couldn't hear him, and all I was looking up in front of me was I could see Manu Tuolangi and Alex Tuolangi thinking, if they do move it, you know, I'm 5 yards from the line. I've practiced this technique all week with Brendan, I hope it works. But law of averages says it might go over. You're just so nervous. They've got the ball, they're 5 yards out. Yeah, it takes one half missed tackle and they score. And you're thinking, oh, not again, not after last year.
The season rests on this moment. Youngs is driven backwards.
That last passage of play was probably a true testament to the trust and camaraderie within that team. We look back over the course of that whole season, the small building blocks to making that team tight, to making sure that culture is one of confidence, but one also of a consistency that players are willing to go the extra mile for their teammates. And I think that all culminated in that final moments in 2011.
The backs are waiting for it. Crane. It's monumental defence from Saracens.
What was going through your mind?
Changed during the course of the 35 phases because there's a lot of time to think, and first of all it was stress and please, kind of that kind of, and then I started thinking, what will I say in the change room if they score? Because this is going to be the second year in a row, but this is going to be different because this is going to be such a cruel way to lose. And then it's 20 phases have gone, and as a coach you're always thinking like how we view the game and how we view the performance of the players can't be determined as to whether they score in this phase of play or not. You're going to be proud of the performance come what may.
6 minutes of added time. It's taken by Jordan Crane.
But I'm glad I didn't have to speak in the changing room after the match because we just kept on tackling for each other, fighting for each other, and they looked less likely to score the longer the defensive set went on, to be honest.
From the darkest corners, Leicester are searching for inspiration, flooded really well, but the tackle was a really, really important one, and it was made by Farrell.
I was standing at 2 in the defensive line, and someone did a pick and go, I'm not sure who, and I was right there, so I managed to get on ball. I managed to get my hands on it.
All I could think at that point was just bind onto Kelly and make sure he doesn't get sacked. They can't pull him out, they can't clean him, so as soon as Kelly got his hands on the ball, I bound onto Kelly.
And the ref gave us a penalty.
And it's a penalty to Saracens! The debate ends. An extraordinary finish this year lands their way.
I still now, when I watch it back, I get goosebumps because it's almost as if there's been an explosion where the ball was, because all our boys just scatter and start going absolutely mental.
Kelly gets over the ball, gets over it, whistle goes, and we just all go absolutely bananas. Kind of a surreal moment. It's one of those ones that you sort of, on the one hand, I can remember really clearly, but now it all blurs into one. Just jumping around, screaming, shouting, not really knowing what to do. I think Brad jumps on me, my knee buckles, I run over to another group, jump on them, just general kind of shouting without any real direction, but unbelievable moment. Actually one of the moments that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
That final whistle, I don't think there's ever been a moment like it in rugby for me since. The joy and emotion is just incredible. And I watched back and I've seen the photos, and we were like hysterical kids. It was the happiest moment. You just couldn't believe we'd done it.
The picture I have in my mind is on that final whistle, when that whistle went, is Jock Burger throwing his arms up in the air. And that's the picture I have. And I just jumped up, I think, you know, as quick as I could. I think I forgot about my arm and ran onto the pitch. I don't know who I got to first, but yeah, it was a great feeling. And for me also probably the best on-field memory I have in a Saracens jersey, given the disappointment of 2010 being written off by a lot of pundits, by a lot of some of our own supporters at times. You know, it was great to actually put that to bed and to nail that first Premiership crown.
I do remember the sheer joy of the players. That's probably the big thing that I remember for the whole season, was the 10 seconds after the final whistle. The 10 seconds after the final whistle were amongst the most pure, natural joy that I think the club's experienced, because it was the first time, and that was incredibly special.
If you could just bottle that feeling, that 5 seconds or so, then just be, you know, priceless really. And there's been other finals that have been great feelings, but I think the emotion there for first final, first Premiership win, to do it in such dramatic circumstances, to hold on for so long, just meant everything.
Post the final whistle, I think you got a true sense of what it meant to everyone in that team. Not only was it coaches, you know, the greatest squad coming on the pitch, there were families, there were wives, there were children. You know, you sit in the change room afterwards, and it's one of those, you know, really humbling experiences where you never want to leave the change room. You never want to leave that feeling behind.
For the first time ever in my life, I got pulled out to do a drug test. So by the time I got back, obviously I missed a good half an hour of celebrations, but luckily it didn't stop me to celebrate it from there.
Overall, the season, if I think about it, with the emotion of what I went through with my family, and then coming into the Sarries family, just a huge validation and culmination of everything we were trying to create. And those moments, days and weeks after the final win, I just thought how special it is for me to be involved with this group, to come through the loss in 9-10, to win in 10-11, to be through my mum's sickness, to feel like I've got a family around me. It was just an incredible experience, and I think, you know, those moments don't come every so often, and I feel privileged to be part of it.
Did I think it was a group that was going to fight back and win after we'd lost the final in, I'm forgetting my years, 2010? Yeah, I absolutely did. Failure, in a way, is what defines you. Because we all have to lose, we all have to fail. And it's how you know, come back from that stronger. And I think Saracens has just got that massive togetherness.
One person in particular that this would have meant more to would be to Nigel Ray and his family, having been the person that took Saracens from an amateur club into the professional era, the years of support that he'd given, the sacrifice. You know, not only was Nigel the chairman, but he was also someone who lived and breathed Saracens. He attended training every week. He was a pillar of support for players both on and off the pitch, and to do something special and to see the elation in someone like his face is a memory that I'll hold dear forever.
I'd always write my mum's initials on my wristband, and so she was right up there in my thoughts, and she would have loved it, you know. But that's it, the Sarries family were there for me, and in a weird way I was able to sort of give back the way that Nigel was able to support me and the family. I just hope that was a small way I could contribute by defending, you know, for my life.
I think that 2011 squad and the success that squad achieved over that time, over those 2 years, I think was very important for Saracens moving forward, and not so much on the field, but probably off the field. You know, there was a certain value system put in place. There was a certain way of doing things, the way of treating each other that was put in place that became part of our DNA as a club. It was about treating people well and working damn hard.
You now have seasoned internationals and Lions. They understand what we created, what the culture means, and what it took for us to get to that point. So I think there's now a baseline of what a Saracen means.
That squad of 2010, 2011, I think our identity was formed in those 2 years, particularly those 2 years, which then I believe formed the foundation for many, many years, and hopefully still plays a part in the foundation that was laid back then, today still, with the teams running out and playing in playoff games. And I'm sure we'll see a team and a squad hopefully get back to those heights in the year or two to come.
Seeing Saracens playing in the Championship was just proof of what we always thought and believed, that there's no such thing as a pick and choose mentality. No matter what field you go to, no matter if there's no crowds, these guys will rock up and give their best and work hard and go for that goal that they set themselves. The goal was to get back in the Premiership, and nothing was going to stop them. It just showed, first of all, the family, the fight, the effort, everything, and the belief in this club that the guys decided no matter where we're going, we're going to bounce back and we'll get back stronger. It's a new era. There's a new, hopefully, decade of greatness ahead of them, and I really believe that will be the case.
We've got a rich history from these last 10 years, and we've got some lessons that we learned, which we'd be foolish to not reflect on from time to time. But like you said, there are some characteristics and traits which were formed in those first 3 or 4 years after Brennan took over, which we'll always need if you want to be a successful club over a very long period of time, which is what the club ultimately want to be. Then those traits and those characteristics are going to have to be part of that DNA.
This group here now, you see it. There's still a burning urge to be so successful and to be dominant, and I think what you have is you have a group of senior players and a bunch of coaches who are so driven that everyone's accountable, those standards are always high, and the young group coming through, they have these role models in front of their eyes who they see day in, day out, and how hard they work and what it means to be a top player and what it takes as a group and a club to win in those big games and those big environments. And you know, because of that, I believe the club's in good hands.
It's the environment and it's the people. We've got a lot of people that care so much about the place. If you have people that care and they're good players and good at their jobs as well, and their mates, I think it's a pretty good starting point for us to really attack and to go after the future. And we've had an amazing 10 years at the club, and I'm just so excited to do it all again.
Everything in life is all about the quality of people, isn't it? Be it rugby, be it companies, be it anything. And we've had really good people at the top now for well over 10 years. Mark, like in so many cases, he took up the baton and has run even further with it. You know, he is somebody who really does take things to heart, and he really does want to create a place where everybody matters, where you really care for people, and then hopefully you'll win. But it's that way round. I wish I'd realized that many decades ago in my life, that you know, look after people, let people know that they count, they really matter, that they belong, and my God, they perform better.
I think the easiest way to say it is we want not just players, we want people who care about what they do, genuinely take pride in what they do, but who care about who they do it with. genuinely care about who they do it with. And when you have that, you can go somewhere.